My name is Rick Tischaefer. I'm the president of the North Dakota Fur Hunters and Trappers Association. Today we're going to talk a little bit about snares or cable devices and their legal requirements for North Dakota. So I'll draw your attention over to what this first device that I've got. This device is intended to catch and kill an animal. All right, primarily fox coyote is our target species when we're using these types of cable devices. Some of the requirements that we have here in North Dakota is, first of all, that you have to have written permission from the landowner where these devices are being placed and used. Okay, and that also includes plots lands. Even though those lands are, the landowners agreed to let folks on there to hunt and trap, you still need written permission in order to do that. So first off, written permission is required. Second thing we have to do is we have to tag or identify every one of our cable devices that are placed in the field. Now the requirement for these types of tags is that they contain your name, address, and phone number, or your equipment identification number. Your equipment identification number can be obtained just by going onto your Game and Fish account page and go ahead and register for that. And that'll issue you your equipment identification tag. So one or the other, name, address, phone number, or equipment identification tag. So each device is tagged individually. The next requirement we have is that there's a maximum loop stop placed on the cable so that a loop can be made no greater than 12 inches. All right. Generally for the animals, for the foxes and coyotes that we use these devices for, an 8 to 10 inch loop is all that's really generally needed. But the law states that there must be a stop on the cable that prevents the loop from getting larger than 12 inches. So if we did the quick math, basically 37 3/4 inches from the end of the cable is where that loop has to be, that loop stop has to be placed. Okay. The other items that we're going to find that are required on our devices is some sort of breakaway device. Now, a breakaway device is intended to separate or fall apart when a certain weight is applied to it. We have breakaway devices in North Dakota that have to be no greater than 350 pounds. All right, they have to break away at less than 350 pounds. All right, so in this particular device, we've got an S hook that's attached to the locking system. All right, this particular brand of S hook will separate about 285 pounds. All right, there's several different breakaway devices shaped as an S hook or a J hook that are manufactured and available for sale. You have to make sure that you're buying from a reliable vendor and that those separation weights are accurate to what is advertised. Sometimes that advertising doesn't match up the actual separation weight. So you want to be sure that that is the right weight that will separate, and that you're individually responsible for that. Just because you bought it from a manufacturer that said it separates at a certain weight and it doesn't, you're responsible for that. So you want to make sure. Buying from an individual or a vendor that's got a good reputation, stands behind their product, and things will be just fine for you. There is another device that some folks will use on the end of their cable. It's basically a release ferrule. In this particular case, this ferrule is set to stay in place. Once the device is anchored and enough stress is placed on the loop, the S hook will separate versus the ferrule popping off. All right, so we have breakaways. They're intended to release cattle, calves, any other non-target species like elk, sheep, moose, deer, things like that. So they keep the loop together for the smaller species like the fox and coyotes that we're trying to catch, and it releases those larger animals in case they encounter this loop and get it on their foot or their leg. They're able to break away from the device, and no part of this device is actually traveling with the animal when it leaves. It basically separates here, the loop disassembles, and the animal's free to leave. So it's a very important component of this device. This particular device is a lethal device, and we know that by the lock. We have a hinged lock, and basically what it does is it allows the loop to get smaller, but it doesn't allow the loop to get bigger. All right. And we have a spring, a torsion spring that's built into this device so that it places pressure on the bottom of the lock to keep it tight against the cable so it doesn't back up. We want this cable loop to get smaller as tension's applied and never ever reverse itself to come back. All right. That assists us with causing the animals to dispatch the animal that's caught in it. All right. So this is a lethal device, and that's the intent of the spring, is again just to keep pressure on the lock so that it stays tight against the cable. The spring itself doesn't advance the cable or make the loop smaller. It's just there to keep the pressure on that part of the lock so it bites the cable. Okay. Our lethal devices come in different lengths. You want to probably start out about at least a minimum of 8 feet, and some of them can be as long as 12 feet. And what that does is allows that animal to get, the captured animal, or fox or coyote, to get into some entanglement, so that that cable gets wrapped up and stuff, and it causes death much faster. All right, so we want to be cognizant of that. It's pretty important that when we use our cable devices, that our components, our intent is to catch and kill that animal, that we use the right components and that this device is placed in the right, the set is made right so that the animal can be entangled in either some brush or some smaller trees that are close by. All right, that'll aid in that cable being able to cause its death. Okay. Another device that we may use here in North Dakota is a restraining device. It's something that we may use in areas where we might encounter someone's dog, basically a stray dog out there rambling around on the countryside kind of a thing. If there's that concern of maybe catching that dog, or you feel more comfortable checking your equipment every day and being able to deal with a live coyote or fox, that'll work for your individual situations there. So it may work for you. You don't always have to use a lethal device. You can use a restraining device. In this particular case, again, just because it's a restraining device, we still have the same requirements. We have to have written permission from the landowner. We have to have our devices tagged. This particular device is quite a bit shorter. It has about a 36-inch stem, basically the anchoring line, okay? And then we have a swivel that's built into the center of the device. The intent of this device is to catch and hold that animal to restrain them unharmed. All right, so we place a swivel up close to the loop so that whatever direction the animal travels or turns, the swivel will turn with it, so there's no binding action, and that'll keep the lock from cinching down and creating a lethal situation. All right, this is a washer lock. It slides freely back and forth on the cable. Okay, and what that does is, as the animal pulls on the device, the loop gets smaller, but if he quits pulling, it's able to slide itself back just a little bit. It'll never ever slide back far enough that it'll come off the animal's head. The shape of the animal's head and the nature of the cable device will prevent that from happening. So what we want to make sure on these two is that we're using a washer lock, that's basically this restraining device, and our S-hook is directly attached to the lock. Works at the same principle as the lethal system. If there's enough significant amount of pressure, more than 285 pounds in this case for this product, it will separate and cause the loop to disassemble and open up and allow that non-target animal to leave the set. Okay, so that's our breakaway device. All right, similar to the other lethal set. So we fashion these devices so that they can be anchored. All right, every device that we set has to be anchored solidly, and solidly means either using re-rod device or re-rod trap stakes, maybe earth anchors. Basically, what you want to do is anchor this system so that it's strong enough to hold a battleship. And the reason I say that is because This has to be solid enough so that if you pick up a non-target animal, that lock will open up when they apply pressure to it. If this is not a substantial anchoring system, this will pull out of the ground and the animal will be able to leave with the whole cable device. So we want to make sure that we're solidly anchored. It is against the law in North Dakota to anchor to anything that can be moved. Any old farm machinery that's out in the field or anything like that, we don't use drags or anything like that for these cable devices. They have to be solidly anchored, all right? And the reason for that is so that that breakaway device works if it needs to, all right? The second part of this type of device and how we set it, we want to make sure that the circle that it creates once it's restrained, so that'll be the circle from the anchoring point around the anchoring point, probably out 5.5 feet. We want to make sure that that's all free of entanglement. That means brush, pieces of equipment, fence posts, things like that. Because if that animal has the opportunity to wrap up on anything that's within that catch circle, this lock will not be able to work as it's designed to, okay? It'll continue to tighten, but because of the entanglement that's there, it won't be able to slide back, all right? So it will essentially just create a lethal system again, just like the device that we had before, all right? So we want to make sure that our area is free of entanglement and that we check this every day, okay? There's a reason you're using this, because there's maybe a suspicion that you may catch a non-target dog that may be wandering or nearby, kind of a thing. So for the same reason we're using these types of components, the same reason for that everyday trap check, all right? So you gotta look at it every day. We don't leave them out there more than a day. Because again, the idea is to keep them restrained, unharmed, all right? The longer they're in the device, the more potential there is for causing a problem or getting injured. So in the case, we would step back a little bit to our lethal device. These types of systems can be, because we're counting on entanglement, these types of systems can be anchored to buckbrush or tree trunks, fence posts, solidly staked, or using earth anchors to anchor this type of device. Same requirements exist that anchoring device that's being used cannot move, all right? No drags, no springy brush, anything like that. Make sure it's a solid anchor, again, so that breakaway device works in case it's needed, all right? Most of the devices that you'll come across will have some sort of support collar, because what we're doing is we're creating a loop to catch an animal traveling down a trail, all right? So there has to be some sort of system in place to suspend this loop over that trail. This particular case here, this is a solid metal support collar. It's matched with the diameter of the cable and the type of support system that we're going to use. In this case, and a good recommendation is a 9-gauge wire be used in North Dakota. It stands up well to the wind, snow, things like that are, the harsh winter conditions that we experience here in North Dakota. And it's just a matter of a friction fit where the 9-gauge wire goes through the support collar. That suspends the loop over the trail, and of course then your 9-gauge wire, you have to devise a system that holds that 9-gauge wire up for you, all right? You can use a variety of things. You can use a trap stake with welded 9-gauge wire to it. You can use railroad spikes. Here's a couple of examples where a railroad spike is used, where the spike is driven into the ground and the 9-gauge wire is used to support the loop over the trail, okay? This is not your anchoring system. Obviously, it's too short in order for that to happen, but railroad spikes work good at driving in frozen ground. So again, not an anchoring system, just a support system, all right, with our 9-gauge wire, okay? Another option may be using one of your trap stakes that you use to anchor your lethal device, also supporting your loop over the trail, okay? And again, if you have any questions about what we just discussed, contact the moderator of the site and we'll get those answered for you. Thanks for watching.